This is Annelie.
And this is Nils from Bel Canto.
What is he gonna tell us? Shimmering warm and bright, shimmering warm on the opposite side.
You're listening to
The New Wave Music Podcast.
You're tuned into the New Wave Music Podcast, your go-to destination for exclusive interviews, album reviews, and the latest music news. And now, here's your host, Steve.
The band Single Gun Theory remains one of the most innovative and influential electronic acts to emerge from Australia. They blended ambient textures, world music influences, sampling, and deeply emotional songwriting. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Jacqui Hunt from the Single Gun Theory. I'm excited to look back at the band's remarkable catalog and also talk about her new solo album. Well, Jacqui, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us on the podcast. It's so lovely to be speaking with you.
It's a pleasure to be speaking with you. Thank you.
So, Jacqui, if we can begin at the very beginning, how did Single Gun Theory come together in the mid-'80s?
I had actually been in another band, and I think that band was going through a couple of changes, and Pete, I met Pete Karnak. He was kind of, Pete was in the scene, and he was going to do some keyboards, and then all of that just kind of folded. And then down the track, and Kath and Pete had come and seen, they'd been to some live shows and knew the band that I was in. And then look down the track, so then I was without a band now, and down the track they'd been writing some material and invited me to come over. And so, yeah, I liked what I was hearing, and that was that. It kind of progressed. I don't think we had any kind of real vision for the band in any way. It was just, let's see what comes from working together, the three of us. And we did enter one of the songs into a band competition on Double J radio. And what happened is if you were chosen, you got to be the band of the week and have your song played, and then they would come and film a gig. And so we honestly didn't think that we'd win, because the flavour of the day was guitar music, and we weren't that. Anyway, we did, and that kind of threw us into a bit of turmoil because we weren't playing live, so we sort of did a studio setup, and then things kind of rolled from there. It's like, oh, I guess we are a band and we need to do more. And then it moved quite quickly, really, from then.
Well, I have to say your band name, Single Gun Theory, was one of the most distinctive names in electronic music. What inspired the name, or what did it mean to you at the time?
Look, I was so young. I didn't really think about it in a major way, but I've thought about it more as time has gone on in some ways. But we were, a very democratic band and had a bunch of names, and we had a little voting system, and that was the one that kind of came out on top. And it probably wasn't I don't think it was any of our first preferences, but, that's what came. And any band that's coming up with a name for their band kind of goes through a bit of it's kind of uncomfortable, because then you're saying a name for your band and you don't really know how it will be received. And anyway, through the years it became a kind of, it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. At one point we could have been, I think we had the Sisters of Mercy as a name, and look, that band exists, as we know. And one of the other crazy names on the list was Brain Size and Diet. So I think we did well with Single Gun Theory.
Well, I do have to ask about the early days of Single Gun Theory. You guys were combining electronic music, sampling, and also having some world influences long before it became common. Who or what were some of your biggest influences during those early years?
Oh, do you know, I thought, oh, you're probably going to ask me a question like that, and that's going to be really hard for me to answer because I'm not great at kind of remembering who I was listening to all those years ago, and also and answering for Kath and Pete on that level too. I guess, I mean, we all like Severed Heads, and there were, I mean, at that time, I actually don't know who Kath and Pete were listening to. I think Kate Bush would have been in there, and yeah, I mean, for myself, Nick Cave. It's a kind of a tricky question. You know, sometimes we remember a lot of things that we listen to from our record collections that we've, you know, built through our lives, or CDs, as the case may be. And I literally don't have any of that part of my life. It's completely removed from my life. And that's another story. And it's kind of a funny thing because you realize how many memories are attached to those things that we kind of hold. You could probably run off a few names and I'll be like, yeah, we love them. You know, I think, you know, the Smiths would have been in there. Peter Gabriel would have been in there. Brian Eno would have been in there.
So your debut album, Exercise the Wasteland, introduced listeners to the band's unique blend of electronic and atmospheric sounds, and the title track, Exercise This Wasteland. Do you remember what your inspiration was behind that song?
You know, Kath Power wrote the lyrics to Exercise This Wasteland, and Pete did the production. I know that, and wrote the music, and I know that the cut-ups came from radio, Sydney radio, like a very conservative man on Sydney radio that was, you know, free white liberal voting, heterosexual North Shore GPS, all of that. So I think it was probably just being young and angry. Yeah, about, you know, certain attitudes in the world.
Well, I do have to say one of my favorite tracks on that album was Open the Skies.
Take the skies and open them for me. I breathe fire, but I move so free, move so sensually. Anything from me, anything from me.
Do you have any memories of recording that song that you could share?
Open the Skies, yeah, like I suppose, yeah, I'm just taking my mind back to when that was recorded. And I'm kind of remembering now. I remember that I was doing belly dancing at the time and sort of very kind of into a lot of, you know, Middle Eastern sounds.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, these recordings, you know, we recorded them in our home studio, and then I guess we went to Canada and did the record. So recorded that in the studio there, which, you know, I remember being in the studio, and I can't even remember the name of the studio now, which is a shame. But not really beyond that, but sort of remembering myself being in a dark room with headphones and sort of earlier versions of the track with tape and learning parts and writing parts, doing little backup vocals, and yeah, just kind of really remembering the experience of how it all came together, because often things were done a few times before it made it to the final recording.
I do have to ask you about your follow-up album, Millions Like Stars in My Hands, The Daggers in My Heart Wages War.
Yeah.
That's quite an album title. How did that album title come about?
Again, that was Kath. That was a Kath lyric. I haven't spoken to her about that for a long time, but I think I do remember, I think there were some tensions in the band at the time, and I think there might have been undercurrent of some kind of message in the title. Yeah.
Hmm.
I think that's probably my memory. Yeah.
Well, that album did contain the song "From a Million Miles." Which
Yeah.
arguably became the band's signature song. Why do you think that song connected so strongly with the listeners?
Probably because it was, an upbeat sounding track, and I think that was the time that dance music and electronic music was, and I think it was gaining a lot of popularity. And so From a Million Miles and it also had that world influence in there that was kind of new. So I think it was really just a combination of those things. Who can say? I mean, I don't know what makes people like what they like. I guess we were lucky to have radio play, because that meant that we were heard, because we weren't really doing gigs. So on that level, we certainly built an audience that way. And I think if we knew the answer to what makes people like what, then a lot of people would be really successful.
Surrender was another important single from the album.
Things have to change, like our feelings. Let's not look for blame. Don't throw your faith in others' way, because we have ended this way. Don't ever think I don't care about you. What you've always known is true.
What can you tell us about the writing and recording process behind that track?
I think Surrender, I just kind of remember, I think that's the one with Natalie Wood, is it, in Surrender? I think so. And I know that there was a Natalie Wood movie that I absolutely loved, and it's terrible. I wish I'd known in advance what these questions were, because then I could have the answers for you. But I almost feel like I need to just Google what movie that was, because I know Splendor in the Grass, wasn't it? Splendor in the Grass. Yeah. I think I know for me, that was a big part of the emotion in the song.
Well, let's talk about the album "Flow River of My Soul." I believe that came out in the mid-90s. And it contained the lead single "Fall," which remains one of the band's most beloved songs.
Fall is the ending, the termination in this moment of realization. I have a vision, a very calming place where we fall like lovers into
What inspired that track?
I'm not entirely sure if this would be right to say that there had been a death in the family, but I think that's what occurred at that time. It's very difficult for me to answer all of these questions, because Kath has written a lot of these lyrics. So when I'm singing them, I have to have my interpretation on those lyrics. So I'm singing them from my perspective, not necessarily the perspective of her take on what those words mean.
Well, since I do have you, I do have to ask you about my favorite Single Gun Theory song of all time, which is Motherland.
Goodbye, the love of our lives. It's still with me now. Through the years, carried pain, loss of my love.
What's something you can maybe share about the recording of that song, or from your perspective, what went on with that song?
Motherland, I know Motherland is a favourite of mine too. It's a song that I love to sing, and I've actually recorded a sort of just a very simple acoustic version of that. Motherland was inspired by a friend who was making a film, and the film was titled Motherland, and that is the director Creve Stenders, who we worked with a couple of times. He made the full video clip. And so Motherland really is partly because he was making a film called Motherland, and it was about his grandmothers coming out to Australia, his Latvian grandmothers, and it's a really beautiful film. So Motherland was inspired by Creve's film.
So speaking of film as well, Single Gun Theory, you guys, the final, I guess, album you guys did was for the soundtrack for The Monkey's Mask.
Yeah.
Was composing for a film a different experience versus creating a traditional Single Gun Theory album?
Totally. I think it was quite difficult for Single Gun Theory to do that because, you don't have the same freedom, and Single Gun Theory always just kind of did what we wanted to do. So, when you're writing for a film, I mean, the experience was a great one to have, and I really enjoyed having the opportunity to do that. But I don't think, as far as Single Gun Theory goes, I don't think it was kind of the right thing for Single Gun Theory as a unit. I think we all kind of went our separate ways a little bit during the writing of that. We didn't really work together as a band. We kind of did parts separately. It was a kind of a tricky time in our lives, and also I think Single Gun Theory were changing.
So I guess after that album, the band gradually became inactive. Was there ever a formal decision to end Single Gun Theory, or did life simply take everybody in different directions?
Yeah, I think that's what happened. Life did take us all in different directions. That's right. Like sometimes I could say it's kind of a bit frustrating because I probably had hopes that Single Gun Theory would continue. But we didn't ever officially break up as such. So, yeah, it is what it is. That was kind of the end of Single Gun Theory at that point. But, we're in touch now, and that's right. Life did move in new directions for all of us. That's right.
You also collaborated with Delirium on the song Euphoria, which became a favorite among many fans of both Delirium and Single Gun Theory. How did that collaboration come about?
Yeah, I just kind of remember. I think as I was saying before, Single Gun Theory weren't really doing too much. I was asked would I like to, work on a track with Delirium, and of course, because I wasn't active with Single Gun Theory, it's like, yeah, I'd love to, because I really need to be doing music, because I love creating music and singing and writing. So I said, sure. They sent over a couple of tracks, and I ended up with Euphoria. And I recorded the vocals in Australia. That was kind of, because this was all pre-internet too. So you did feel like slightly detached, but you'd wait for something to arrive in the mail. The tape has to be sent over, all of that kind of thing. It's all a very slow process. And I recorded my vocals, sent it back. They have to be patient and wait to hear what I'm going to send back. And yeah, that was kind of pretty much it. And I'm really, really pleased to be on the album, because it's a fabulous album.
Well, speaking of a fabulous album, you have a new solo album out, Desiderium, and this is your first album in more than 18 years. What inspired you to return to recording, and what was the inspiration behind this album?
Yeah, I know. It sort of seems like I haven't done anything for 18 years, but that's not entirely true, because like in the 18 years, I did a little bit with, released a couple of tracks here and there with a couple of other artists, made another album in 2017 under the name Sive. That's like so underground, would be a nice way to talk about that album. And then, so I always wanted to do another album, but now life was getting in the way of me making that album. And so, but I had been working all that time, writing and experimenting, rejecting a lot of stuff, just all of that, moving house, doing whatever, working. And then I think it was really just after the death of my father, and then the death of my mother, sort of just under 2 years after that, I really just needed to release something, because I just had, I felt like I just needed something to help me heal, and music is a really healing experience. So I was sitting down at the piano doing, just writing as a way to, I don't know, just change or process my grief, I guess. And then I just decided, I think it was after the loss of mum, that, life is short, because both my parents, my mother was quite young. And so I was just like, I need to do this. I've just got to do this now. I can never keep waiting for the perfect moment. And now is the perfect moment now. I just need to do this. So I channeled a lot of energy into creating Desiderium. And even though I've got lots of material and ideas that I've worked on through the years, it was just like, this is Desiderium. This is the handwriting of Desiderium. So I gave myself that kind of project and a deadline. Like, I need to do this for myself. So I did.
It's a great album. I found myself getting pulled in from the very first note. And I'm wondering what artists, bands, or musical influences maybe inspired this album or inspired the sonic direction of the album.
Yeah. Well, I suppose, in the last several years, artists that I've listened a lot to would be, I've listened to a lot of Nick Cave's work, a lot of Aldous Harding, Goldfrapp, PJ Harvey, just Tom York, of course, I'm a huge fan. So really, and I was just working, so they've all got sort of elements of electronic and organic. And I think there was a lot of expectation on me for a long time that I should sound like Single Gun Theory. So, you know, the 18 years in some respect has been a good thing because I feel like I don't have to be the past anymore. And certainly I think because this album is so emotionally deep to me, whether or not that comes across to the listener, I don't know. But, you know, that's the great thing with age, isn't it? You're just more free to be yourself. That's not to say that I don't love what I did with Single Gun Theory, because I do, and I love electronic music very much as well. But this was just the kind of honest moment of this time in my life and how I wanted to. I can't be what I'm not. That's what I was. That is the sound of how I was writing and feeling.
Well said there. And if we can, I just want to jump into a couple tracks to ask you about specifically, since this is stuff that you worked on.
Yeah.
And I really want to highlight these songs with our listeners, that I think they'd really connect well with them. One of the standout tracks on the album is Planet.
Soon I shall greet your day, and your clouds are blown aside, and we collapse into one.
What can you tell us about the inspiration behind that song and the message you wanted to convey?
Planet is a love song, really. And it was written as a poem that was sent to me by Brian Connolly, who is a co-writer on many of the tracks. And funny that you should mention that one, because Planet is he wrote that poem and he sent it to me. I'd started to kind of work with Brian because actually Brian goes back to the very first bands that I was in prior to Single Gun Theory, where I met Pete Karnak all those years ago. And anyway, so Brian sent me those lyrics after we'd been working together for not too long. And I just really liked that poem. So I sent it back to him, and he was at an airport in Kuala Lumpur at the time. And he was like, wow, I love what you've done for that. And it was a kind of a big turning point in our whole relationship, I guess you could say. And Brian is actually my partner in life. And it is a love song. And it's gone through many different versions. And I've never sort of, I don't know, it was like, oh no, that's not quite right. That's not quite right. That's not quite right. And then it just sort of came together really quickly at the end of making Desiderium. I didn't actually even know if Planet would go on the album, but it did. And it's a personal favorite too. And I'm really pleased because it had been through kind of like, it was always going to be special to me and to Brian as well. But I just couldn't find the sound that I wanted to have. It was always a private song, I guess, and then finally it turned into the version that I felt was right to release.
Well, Cycles is another fascinating track.
And you can't save me, but if anyone could, you would be on the front line, and that's so incredible. So incredible. Now the show is over.
What was the creative process behind that song?
Cycles is, I mean, it's all kind of sad in a way, but beautiful too, because Cycles is a piano song, and my father, he played piano, and he probably introduced me to the love of piano because, I grew up with a piano and Dad playing. And I nursed my father through the last year of his life, which was pretty intense because he had cancer. And then I think after his passing, I just that was me processing as well. And I just needed to kind of, I don't know, it's like it just kind of came out cycles. And I was thinking of Dad, and it was very much a piano ballad, which I'd not done before. I think it's fairly straight kind of lyrics, but it was also like, you can't save me, but if anyone could, you'd be on the front line. That's kind of him also thanking me for helping him through a really difficult time, which was my honor to do so, I might say. So then I think, because see, the thing about when you make records and then you talk about them, this was all written some time ago, and now I'm having to remember what I've said again. And yeah, like if I could have the time again, the show is over, because my father was a theatre director, and it's like, the show is over. It's like, honey, he would say, it's all a performance. So it's like, the show's over. I want to see again. And, that's the cycle, really. That's what it is.
Well, one track on the album that really stood out to me for it, that has a beautiful and reflective quality to it, is Look at the Sky.
The clouds, bird of prey, supernatural. Look at the sky, the golden ray. Feelings are brought with me into space. I have come here to eradicate. Now we see the sun.
What inspired that song, and what story does it tell?
Yeah, that's great to hear. It's funny, it's always interesting to hear what resonates with somebody. Look at the Sky is this could happen to anybody, but Look at the Sky is really about me thinking, you're feeling these intense feelings sometimes during a grieving process, and they can be quite varied. Grief can be really beautiful and also very complex and also very sorrowful, and all of these things. So Look at the Sky is me thinking, when you're in these intense emotions and you just think, gosh, is this ever going to end? Is this weight going to lift from me? Will I be light again? It's kind of like, look at the sky. It's like a meditation. Just pull yourself back to your life right now. Look at the sky. Take a really simple thing and just focus on that. And so there's that aspect of it. But then it's also like, I think I go into Feelings You Gave Me a Long Time Ago, because death can also bring up, all your history or all those emotions, various things you've felt. And so there's a little bit of that as well. Feelings You Gave Me a Long Time Ago, Unraveling Faster, Spill Into the Ocean. I wrote that song from a really beautiful place in New South Wales on the coast, and I had my keyboard with me, and I could just look out the window and I could see the ocean and this cliff, and I was just processing, a lot of personal moments in my mind.
Well, the track Temple of Illumination,
I feel the warmth like sun rays in the dark.
I gotta say, is one of the album's most intriguing titles. Can you maybe tell me how that song came together?
Yeah, that's Temple of Illumination is, well, during the last couple of years, I'd started to do guided meditation on a weekly basis in this group, and I really love doing that. It was actually quite a fascinating little thing with Temple of Illumination, because the woman that I do these sessions with had invited me to go to a sound healing, and it was with like an Aboriginal guy that does, he uses kind of bush leaves and singing bowls and didgeridoos and lots of, some traditional elements, and then just kind of beautiful sound healing, percussive instruments too. It was actually in a space that I'd been to with my father. Anyway, it was just all caught up in that time, but I guess I wouldn't have started the meditations if I hadn't gone the grieving process. And also I'd had some of my own health issues that I've dealt with. So like I was doing a lot of healing through that time. And Temple of Illumination was kind of like a very strange visual that came to me during a sound healing.
Well, the last standout track on the album I need to ask you about is Alice Magic.
Don't do what's right from her perspective. It's the golden fleece, the holy grail of inheritance.
What can you tell us about the inspiration behind that song?
I know. Well, Alice Magic, it's like, hey, it's time to get happy. It's time to cheer up. We can't. I mean, and I sound like I've been so, grief and all of that. And it hasn't been like that at all. I mean, it has, but I say it hasn't been like that at all. It has. It's had incredibly intense moments, and also, some really beautiful moments and very spiritual moments. And then also moments it's like, hey, like you've got to just find yourself and get back to life after a certain point. You can't, you've got to shake these feelings. And so Alice Magic, that one's very much got my mum in mind with Alice Magic, because it was inspired by an etching that I have that was hers by an Australian artist, Charles Blackman. My mother gave this etching to me before she died, well and truly before she died actually, but it's just something of hers that I have. So it became even more sort of, it spoke in a louder way to me after she was gone. Yeah, it's sort of like talking about death in some ways, or inspired by the fact that she is gone, because the inheritance aspect. And it's like, our inheritance really is the life that we've been given. Dance and celebrate that, because that is what it's all about, the here and the now, and making life great. We have to do that. We need to do that.
Well, Jacqui, the last question I have for you is, what do you hope longtime fans will take away from the new album? And what song would you recommend as the perfect introduction for listeners discovering your music for the first time?
Well, I do hope that some of my fans of Single Gun Theory would like this direction. I think, I don't know, I suppose this is a quieter album in some ways that they might connect. Really, that's all I could ask for, is that it might touch somebody in some way, and that they can put their own interpretation onto the music, as I do when I listen to music, and that's really that it might have some flexibility, and people can change, and I'm going to change again. And this is just part of my continued evolution of my musical journey. And I think the tracks, what would be the track? That's a good question, because I don't know. I mean, I think Alice Magic's probably the most instantaneous of the tracks. But for me, look, go for Planet, but you've got to be patient, because it's sort of, it's a slow beginning. So people need a bit of patience with this album to, I think, enjoy it. Yeah, maybe Planet's a good start because I think it's got a little bit of kind of handwriting of my past and a little bit of where I'm going on this album.
Well, Jacqui, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure exploring the history of Single Gun Theory, revisiting the albums and the songs that continue to resonate with fans around the world, as well as hearing your stories behind the remarkable new album, Desiderium. And it was an honor to have the opportunity to talk to you.
Oh, thank you, Steve. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I really, appreciate your interest, and I'm sorry that I couldn't be a little more informative on some of the history. It's like, oh my God, what's happened to that woman? I guess, you know what? It's been like 40 years.
It just seems just like yesterday.
It does, doesn't it? I know, but the odd thing reminds me it's not.
Well,
Yeah.
Jacqui, thank you once again for taking the time to speak with us. Like I said, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. My pleasure.
Looking ahead to our next episode, Dawn's going to be back here in the studio, and we're going to be jumping into some long-awaited new albums from Haircut 100 and Midjur. As always, we hope you join us. If this is your first time listening, we thank you and ask that you please subscribe. That's a great way to support us. And if you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to leave us a 5-star review. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Just search for New Wave Music Podcast. We'll catch you on the next episode.